Greetings from my kitchen studio in San Francisco, and welcome to BRC and Friends, a regular-ish 30-minute Google Hangout with me, Bruce Reyes-Chow, where I chat with friends and adventurers from around the interwebs. I'm excited today because I welcome to the show a friend, writer, speaker, and San Francisco native, Romal, and I'm going to flip over so folks can see you. Hey, Romal. Good to see you.
Hey, how you doing, Bruce?
Good to see you. We had a little technical difficulties getting started, but we are on, and y'all are watching this on YouTube probably. But I want to tell you about Romal. He has spent his life in service to local, national, and international issues-based advocacy organizations working to improve the lives of those in need through education and eliminating poverty. He is a sought-after speaker, community strategist, and consultant. As a coach, he equips the young and young at heart with the tools for emotional wellness and values-based leadership. He has a unique gift for empowering people to move from trauma to triumph, love that phrase, and create a reimagined life. He is the author of the critically acclaimed and award-winning book, Gods Graffiti, Inspiring Stories for Teens. He is a magna cum laude graduate from Howard University and Duke University School of Divinity. But before we start talking with him all about some of the things he's doing, I want you to make sure to check out all the links on the YouTube thing. There's going to be a bunch of links down there. You want to check all that out, and you can tweet at us. I'm at Reyes-Chow, and Romal Tune is at ROMALTUNE, and use the hashtag BRC and Friends. As usual, our time will be broken up into 3 segments. The first will be centered around my guest's interests, passions, and expertise. And then the second, we're going to talk about just other random things in life. And then at the very end, I always ask my 5 questions. And so they'll get some of those random things. We'll get to know Romal a little bit more. So let's go and get started. So, Romal, you wrote this book. Tell us a little bit about it and how it got started. Not everybody wants to write a book, but you did it. How did this book get its birth?
Yeah, man. Well, thanks again for having me on your show. This is pretty cool. I'm glad we got to connect this way. So, I didn't plan on writing a book I never really thought about it until a few years back. But it came about out of a crisis after my mom passed. And it was really an opportunity to go back and look at the Bible and find the humanity of the different people we hear talked about in the Bible. And I needed that because after the loss of my mom, I needed a deeper sense of connection with God and to find people in the Bible who were like me. And so when I went back and read those stories, I just saw them through a different lens. I saw their humanity. And I kind of felt like, they weren't being talked about in terms of the challenges that they had to overcome in their families and their communities before they were great leaders. And so I looked at Moses, Joseph, Rahab, Esther, Hagar, Jephthah, and really talked about what was it like to be a young person going through those types of challenges that they had to face in their families, and how did they do that and then become leaders.
Mm-hmm. And so, so you grew up in the church then, and how come, were those parts of those stories not known to you before? Had you heard them and not paid attention to them? Was it a matter of rediscovering the Bible for you? How did was this new, or was it just kind of looking at it differently for you?
Yeah, no, I did not grow up in the church, actually. Didn't become a Christian until I was 25.
Okay.
I served in the military, and then I was in college at Howard University when I became a Christian. So the stories were not new. They just were not told in this way. For example, when I talk about Moses, I talk about a kid with abandonment issues and an anger management problem and low self-esteem, right? He had a stuttering problem, and how did he overcome that? With Joseph, what's it like to be the young guy who, is admonished by his dad for having a dream and beat up by his brothers and thrown away? How do you overcome that and heal with your family? So the stories weren't told through that lens, so all the different stories look at it from another perspective.
Right. So why do you think hearing about the humanity of these biblical persons is important? Why has that spoken to folks?
Yeah, so I think it's really important because oftentimes in the work that I do, more specifically, well, even inside and outside the church, people feel disconnected from the actual people in the Bible. And so in many ways, although they believe God can perform miracles, they feel like sometimes the miracles we have talked about happened thousands of years ago. But even if you extract the person from the miracle and just look at their life, oftentimes people don't feel a sense of connection and being able to identify with the young men and women that we talk about in the Bible. They don't see them as being like us. Right. So to strip away the fantasy and the glamour of who they are and just show them as, hey, man, these were regular people. Right. And they had the same kind of issues we had. And here's how they overcame those issues.
Right. You know, I'm sure there's some people, like, you're messing with Scripture. I remember when I entered seminary at San Francisco Theological Seminary, there were folks who still, I think, had that kind of romanticized, kind of really basic Sunday school versions of these people. And when our professors started to kind of dismantle that and deconstruct who is David, for instance, and, you know, all the stuff that David did and all that, I mean, people's heads exploded. And I remember people really challenging, like, how dare you do this to these great, usually men, like great men of the Bible. Have you had to deal with people challenging you on what you're doing to Scripture?
No, because I only point out what's right there. I quote the text, and I'm not making.
That doesn't matter for some people, man.
I haven't found, that's true. I haven't found anyone say, "Oh my God, you just done violence to the text." What I have found is people more often than not say, "I never saw that," but when I read it, what you're saying is right there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So who have you found that have been most touched by this? I mean, at a certain level, we all can relate to, you know, brokenness and making bad decisions and all that. But have you found there are communities or people that you're interacting with that really kind of grab onto this way of looking at Scripture?
You know, what has been the blessing of it all really is that it has transcended location, social location, and culture. You know, one minute I'm in Auburn, Alabama, and I'm going through the book and people are reading it and I'm sharing my story and it resonates with them and they identify based on their own journey. And then the next week I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, and it's a totally different crowd. And then, you know, then I'm in Compton in LA. So it varies. The locations vary, but the reality is that we all share the same commonality of emotional experiences, right?
Right.
How they happen is different, but the need for healing and the need to stop defining ourselves by our past or by our pain is something that just about everybody can identify with.
Right, right. Well, but the book's titled, you and I have chatted about this a little bit, that it's stories for teens. But my sense is that this isn't just folks who, like, you don't have to be a teenager in order to appreciate this telling and this reading and interpretation. I mean, but are there specific things that you found that are different between maybe the younger or the older, or is it really just kind of across the board?
You know, it is, you know, inspiring stories for teens, and so we kind of niched in that area. But we found, in my experience, I'm doing more talks with adults who are actually trying to heal the wounded child in them, right?
Yeah.
So there's been that component of adults who are saying, this is really helping me. But then there's another audience I found more recently where youth groups that are specifically working with kids who are high risk in urban sectors, it's really helping them. I'm getting a lot of requests to come talk to book clubs that are in the community.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I wonder, you know, when you look at the kind of interest that you have and the kind of the perspective around poverty and education and all that, you know, how the church and faith piece connects to all of that. I mean, how have you seen this being translated into maybe non-church settings for folks to kind of grab onto ways of looking at the world and life? Have you found that there's a good connection there?
Yeah, so, you know, oftentimes in the non-church settings, the initial response is, oh, we can't use that because it's religious or it has the God content. But then when they take the time to read it over, there's a realization that, oh, this content actually transcends that space because it's just talking about the lived experiences of people to some degree through the lens of their faith, but what they experience in terms of rejection, isolation, loneliness, sadness, anger, and the emotional trauma that comes with the things people have said to them or did to them. Everyone gets that. And then what really connects, where they connect, is the fact that in the book there are steps for how to deal with each one of those experiences. Right. And so the connection is really around the fact that it's not just pointing these things out, but it's also giving me some tools that I can now use.
That's great, right? And I know that you're coming up with, you're trying to do some curriculum and some other things, and I'll make sure we kind of include all
Yeah.
those links and things. But I mean, you're really concerned and around poverty and education. You know, what kind of work are you doing right now, whether it's the book or not, to kind of get in? Because I mean, your stage is getting bigger, and and I think you have good stuff to say. How are you engaging in some of the larger conversations about poverty and education these days?
Yeah, so oftentimes I'm speaking at conferences. I have a nonprofit called Faith for Change, and our fiscal agent is actually the Coalition for Community Schools. They're a national organization. We work with Opportunity Nation, which is another national grassroots group that focuses on jobs and education and things of that sort. Right now we're in the midst of developing a few curriculum for kids starting with K through 4th grade and then junior high and high school. And outside of that, I do some giving with a group of folks to support kids going to college who otherwise come from low-income communities but don't have the financial resources to help them get through college. So we're engaging in a number of ways. I'm really excited about the curriculums that are coming out and partnering with educators on the ground who have been helping with constructing that content.
Right, right. That's great. I mean, have you, we're going to shift a little bit, but have you noticed, I mean, class and race and culture are all kind of intertwined these days, but with everything going on in our country around race and education, poverty, all that, have you noticed, have conversations changed for you? Are they getting worse? I mean, it kind of depends, but how do you assess right now how we as a country and a culture engage in conversations about poverty, race, education, and all the ways that those converge together?
Yeah, there are a lot of conversations going on around race right now because of various unfortunate incidents that have happened, in various parts of the country. So in the midst of that, you see a desire for certain groups of people to want to figure it out, to understand where they might be biased in their opinions, and you have different religious leaders coming together. But then you also see some people who are drawing the line in the sand and they feel like we're talking about it too much and things of that sort. I think that in my experience and in my observation that the most challenging yet most healthy way to approach race is through building relationships. When people get to know each other, that's where you begin to break down the barriers. I don't think we can just teach racism away. I think people have to be courageous enough to build relationships with each other.
Yeah, I'm not at all putting down my colleagues that do these racist, race awareness things or these diversity things, but I always laugh when it's like, okay, we're going to do racism for an hour at the beginning of this event, and then we're kind of done. Like, and I get it's important to do, but it almost sets you up to think we can compartmentalize these conversations and we're going to have it now, and then I can kind of stop having to think about it for the rest of my time. So right with you. I think those relationships keep going continuously. So what kind of projects you have going right now? I mean, what kinds of things are you musing about? I mean, you're obviously a person that dreams big and then accomplishes stuff. So like if you what's going on next?
Man, there's so many things going on at one time. It's an exciting time, and I'm cautiously optimistic about it. We have some materials coming out, 240 Days of Inspiration, that will be based on Gods Graffiti. I had 4 writers work on that project with me. Sean Castleberry is working on that. Kathy Kong is working on it. Kevin Alton. So we have a lot of folks that are involved in that project. That should be coming out very soon. Sandra Van Opstel, I'm sorry, she's also on that project. And each wrote 30 days of devotions for each chapter of the book. They're really 240 days of inspiration. We have the curriculum coming out. It's emotional wellness and values-based leadership curriculum. Really excited about that because it helps people deal with their emotional experiences, how to heal from them, but also as we prepare them to become leaders, it's tying in values of giving back and supporting your community, which I feel is really important too. so that we don't have people doing well but not wanting to do good. We want people to do well and do good at the same time.
Right. I mean, it seems so often. I was at an event one time, and there was a speaker that talked about, don't worry about doing anything good in the world until you're rich. And I was like, this was at a baccalaureate. I mean, it was one of those that I was like, wow, that wasn't the message that I just gave, and I'm sure that that's not what they expected you. But it was one of those, is like, and he would kind of say, you know, Bill Gates didn't do good until he was rich and could give away his money. I'm not sure that's true, but it was a fascinating idea that they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and you know, you don't start doing good once you have money. I believe if you're a person who's about doing good in the world, you're doing it regardless of resources. One of the things I wanted to mention, Bruce, I'm about to take a trip with a group of friends to South Africa. We're going to Cape Town for a week and then to Johannesburg. We're partnering with a couple of high schools and some local NGOs where I'll be talking to students, meeting with educators, and also the heads of nonprofits around youth-related issues and higher education in both cities. And I'm not rich, but what I did was I made adjustments to how I live my life so that I can live the life that I really want. So, if, you know, my desire is to do good in the world globally, and so I had to structure my life as someone who really meant that. Yeah. And so, it's how you spend your money will determine who you really want to be in the world.
Yeah, we tell that to our kids all the time. We're in San Francisco, and we're in a 2-bedroom apartment. If I were to pan around a little bit, you would see some pile, and we're in the middle of. There's usually a refrigerator right here, but we're getting a new refrigerator. Like we might have a bigger house, but we told our kids, you know, in order for us to do some other stuff, we got to live a little more simply, and you know, and living in San Francisco. I mean, so let's shift. You're from San Francisco. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up and then when you left.
Man, so yeah, it's funny when people ask me, so where are you from in the Bay Area? We lived all over it, and that's part of why I do the work that I do. I lived in Hunters Point, lived in the Mission District. Some of the neighborhoods, I don't even remember the names, but you know, my family was in Hunters Point, my uncles, my aunts. We lived in the area. We lived off 3rd. We also lived in the Mission off 16th and Mission. Then after my mom, we went through some challenges. I was living in East Oakland, 69. Then I was in Vallejo and the Crest. And then finally left California and moved to New Jersey when I was in 11th grade. But, you know, I love the Bay Area. It's home. I don't get there as often. I was just there actually a couple of months ago for the Social Capital Entrepreneurs Conference. Yep. And it was pretty cool, Bruce, because I went down by Pier 39, man. You know, now I'm a cat with 2 degrees, magna cum laude graduate, and traveling globally. But I went to the pier, and it reminded me of the days when I used to go down there to panhandle just to be able to play games and get food. It's like, man, you know, it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I remember when we were talking a little bit about San Francisco, and my daughter who's looking at high school, one of my daughters looking at high school next year, and I was telling you about, like, Mission High School is up and coming, and I remember you're like, Mission High School? Like, I mean, it is definitely changing here. Have you noticed when you come back, like, are there changes here that have surprised you?
Major changes. I mean, if you go to Hunters Point area, 3rd Street, it doesn't look the same. It's, I mean, it's gentrification is what it is that's happening over there. Yeah. I think what I found really interesting is some people, I don't know how true this data is, but people were saying that the median income in San Francisco is $100,000 or more, and then the average cost of a home was like $1 million. And then they said, but the 55% of the kids in public schools are on free or reduced lunch. So if you take those extremes, it's like, man, the gap between rich and poor is getting broad, you know, wider and wider. And so it's not that poverty has gone down in the city. It's just kind of like it's isolated, and there's just this big gap between those who are wealthy and those who are poor.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we are certainly not struggling, you know, to put food on our table, but our kids, we are just above what they would consider qualifying for free lunch. So it's not like the spread is really, we're starting to see it in huge ways. And my wife's family owns the building that we're in, so we get pretty good rent. We wouldn't be able to live here if it wasn't for family connections and all that, which is how a lot of people will get to stay here. But I think you're right. I mean, what we're seeing in San Francisco is this gentrification, and poor are getting pushed out of the city, and even jobs. My dad runs a kitchen here for an organization, and they're paying $18, $19 an hour, and nobody's willing to take it because it's still not enough to live in the city.
Yeah, you can't live in San Francisco on that income, of course. So that's the biggest thing that I see. It's a sad thing to see, because you got to wonder, these are real lives, these are real people, and what's going to happen to them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it will be. I know we have an election coming up, and I always, we're solidly, I would say, lower middle class now. But I always vote against my best interest for one up, because we have so many folks in the city that are really struggling, and so I'm glad that we have still some old school radicals on the city council for here in San Francisco. We're always going to make sure that those on the margins are taken care of. So hopefully it'll shift a little bit. But the big question, right? Now that you're living in Southern California, are you rooting for the Giants?
Yes, I am. I'm rooting for the Giants. Rooting for the Giants. I'm a Laker fan, and I'm a 49er fan.
Wow. So I'll show you here real quick. So I'm an A's fan, I think you know, and so I have my Kansas City A's hat going on here.
Wow.
So I kind of say it. I use it. It's like, would a Mets fan ever root for the Yankees? No. So why should I, as an A's fan, root for the Giants?
You got to keep it in the family, man. Keep it on the West Coast.
No. My kids are learning how to take. They go to school and everybody knows they're A's fans. And after the A's got knocked out, my daughter says, "I got to go to school tomorrow, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, you got to go. You got to take it. You got to learn how to lose, honey."
Yeah, man. Well, we got beat pretty bad last night.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens tomorrow, but it's a good baseball story both ways. So for baseball, it's good. All right, well, I'm glad you've been able to hang out a little bit, but you can't. I'm not going to let you go yet. You have some questions I need you to answer towards the end of this that every guest answers. So you can respond with as little or as much explanation as you want.
Okay.
All right, here's your first one: a sound or smell that reminds you of your childhood.
A sound or smell that. A smell would be gumbo. It's a Louisiana dish that my grandmother used to make.
All right. The first concert that you ever attended?
NWA.
All right. I'll for some folks either too old or they just don't know. Well, I'll put some links in so folks can know who that is.
Ice Cube, right? It's funny how Ice Cube's now doing like family-friendly movies.
Exactly. It's not Northwest Airlines for those of you that are wondering. All right. So, what was your first or your worst job?
Ooh. Oh my God! I had this terrible job when I was a teenager. Man, I had to go pick up trash in the parking lot.
I bet there's some just nasty stuff you find.
Bro, and it was early in the morning, and we had to drive out there and have it clean before the company opened for business the next day.
Yeah, that sounds bad. All right, you get to switch places for one day with any person in the world. You get all of their talent, resources, and connections. Who would it be?
Bishop Tutu.
All right. I got to meet him one time. I'm sure you probably met him or seen one time. You know the group Mary Mary?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was at it was actually during the inauguration, and it was during worship service, and Mary Mary were singing during the worship, and Bishop Tutu was behind them dancing.
Wow, how cool is that?
It was the best picture I've ever seen. All right, last question before I ask you to lift up a group. And in baseball, player comes up to bat, they choose a song as their walk-up music. What's your walk-up song?
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
All right. And then last question is, pay it forward. One organization that you think more people should know about?
Oh man, there's so many. I'll pick one that I support. I would say Mentoring Today. They're in Washington, D.C. They work with high needs youth and have a great success rate.
Great, great. And I'll make sure I include all those, everything we talked about in links, and kind of make sure that everybody gets a little bit of link love on the recap. So thanks, Romal, for hanging out today. Thanks, everybody else who watched this. Be sure to check out the recap that I'll post on Reyes-Chow.com, and I'll include, again, all the links mentioned today, as well as links to the book and all that kind of stuff. Take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is going to go right there, and then I also will put Romal's right there, so you can subscribe to his YouTube channel. Share the episode with your friends. Be sure to connect with us via all the links. So, again, thanks, Romal. We'll say goodbye. Thanks
hey, man, thank you, Bruce. I'm really glad you got a chance to do this, man. Appreciate it.
Yep. So that's it for today's show. Thanks again for everybody turning in, and until next time on BRC and Friends, please keep talking, because there are times when silence is not an option. We'll see you next time.